Good morning. This is Jason coming live at you again from Film Fanatic headquarters. It's about 11:30 on a Saturday here in Maine, vacation land. I want to thank everybody for their great support uh, over the last few months, but especially the last couple of weeks or so. The It's been great because the number of people who have been subscribing to this channel has grown quite a bit, and it's super awesome. A lot of people have been commenting more and more, and some folks have been also commenting on saying that they've been checking out the videos and also, making these little lists or informal lists about these films that they've never seen. And, they're very much already big fans of horror and science fiction. So they love, exploring and checking out a lot of these new films. And for me, lately, a lot of the films that I've been doing shows on they're very much brand new for me. Were first time viewing situations, and I've just really lucked out with buying movies that are where I've been taking a risk, and I've been just blown away by some of these movies that I've been seeing. And one of the things that's helped a lot over the past year or so is getting more and more familiar with certain labels that are putting out these underground gems. Severin probably being the best one, Blue Underground, Mondo Macabro, which is probably uh, I don't know. It's so hard to say which is my favorite, but I love Mondo Macabro. They really specialize in so many great obscure movies, and I've been buying a lot of films that those companies have been putting out, and they just have an incredible body of work. And I've been taking more of a chance with just buying things in their catalog that I've never seen before, and it's been awesome. So I've really lucked out. So when people say that that's to a degree what they might be using this channel for, that's the best compliment that I can get. So I really appreciate that, and that's really awesome. So today's movie, I'm going to talk about a movie, or I should say movies, that again is wicked old school, and it's a collection of movies that were they're definitely part they it was definitely part of my formative years of discovering the horror movie genre as a kid, and continues. It's a series of films that continue to inspire. I just think that they're amazing. It was, definitely one of the key collections of movies that turned me on to all things horror, and that is this one here, Trilogy of Terror, starring the magnificent Karen Black. Uh, just amazing, just amazing. It came out in the year I was born, which is just bananas, 1975. Um, and this really sums it up. As I hold this DVD, I don't own this on Blu-ray, which is terrible. I need to buy this. I need to buy this on Blu-ray. But this DVD collection is actually really awesome. It's got all three. It's a collection of three short films starring Karen Black. And on the back here, it has a little quick review by Variety magazine. Virtuoso performance by Karen Black. She stars in each of these segments, each of these short films, and she is an just a powerhouse of an actress in these movies. Like, you literally, um, and to a degree, Karen Black was like known as a queen. She made a whole bunch of horror films, but these I think are the best. Um, she was in so many movies at one point, and she's still pretty active in various things. This She was in actually the House of a Thousand Corpses, by Rob Zombie, which is, well, it's older now, but she was actually in Easy Rider, which is wild, which is an amazing movie. Um, but this really is just these films are such an incredible testimony to I think how what a genius Karen Black is. She stars in each short movie, but they're so you literally cannot recognize her in in the films, like from one character to the next. It's unbelievable. And the other thing that's miraculous about this thing that is just always blows me away, and I always for some reason forget about this factor, which is the biggest factor of this movie, is that it was a made-for-TV movie, and I think it's one of the creepiest, one of the scariest collections of horror films or horror shorts ever in the history of 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 the genre. I mean, just amazing, um, just amazing. And so, Trilogy of Terror, 1975, was a made-for-television anthology horror film. It was directed by Dan Curtis, stars Karen Black, and it basically features three segments, each based on a unrelated, they're each based on unrelated short stories by Richard Matheson, who was the writer of these stories. The first follows a college professor who seeks excitement with her students. The second is about two twin sisters who have a bizarre relationship. These two segments were adapted by William F. Nolan. The third, and probably the most well known of this collection, is was also adapted by Matheson himself, and it focuses on a woman terrorized by the Zuni fetish doll in her apartment. And Karen Black stars in all three segments and plays dual roles in the second. I mean, it's amazing. The Zuni fetish doll, which is the third one, is I think one of the most. I think it's the I think all three movies, all three shorts, the first two are just amazing. They're really bizarre. They're pretty scary. A lot of tension. Uh, but there's something about the third one with the Zuni fetish doll that I think is one of the most terrifying movies ever. And especially the ending. It's like it's pure horror. I'm surprised, like in my travels on YouTube and checking out a lot of great YouTube guys that are out there, guys and girls. I never hear this mentioned. For like I've gone through lots of lists or a lot of videos where they talk about, well, obviously we just started a new year, 2023, so the focus is on, for a lot of these YouTube channels, like the best movies that they saw of 2022 or the worst movies that they've seen of 2022. Uh, that's usually the end of the year kind of thing that happens. But in my travels and the videos that I've been watching and guys I've been getting turned on and to girls I've been getting turned on to, I've seen lots of ranking videos where they'll rank their top favorite horror films or even their favorite movies in general. But I've been checking out a lot of the top 10 or top 20 horror movies that they of all time. And I'm amazed that I've never heard. I don't think I've seen this mentioned once. This was a very popular, and again, it's a television series, which was amazing to me that they got, and I think it's a thing of like sometimes that really works, like where you have a film, and due to like say a ratings kind of thing, or if it's made for television, because there's literally limitations as to what they can show and where they can go. Uh, I think in a lot of ways, it makes those films better. I think they really, I'm a fan of, I love a lot of most of the movies I do on this channel are all exploitation movies, and I'm a big fan of sex exploitation and horror exploitation. I'm a fan of, gratuitous sex and gratuitous violence and limbs being cut off and all those things. I love gore films. My favorite genre is the slasher genre, and you can't get any more horrific than that. But I also love films that are just centered on just being really creative stories. And I think the interesting thing with made for TV movies or movies that kind of fall under that umbrella is that because there are all these limitations, I think in one regard it makes these films better because the filmmakers and the creative forces behind these films have to really think of how can they get their point across, how can they create this aesthetic, how can they create the movie to be how can they make the film as terrifying as possible or as suspenseful as possible uh, without having the ability to show lots of violence or lots of gore or lots of sex. Uh, so how can they like have it in this really contained kind of to a degree a censored kind of box. And I think there's been some amazing examples of that, of films that I love, horror films especially, that because of their limitations, they're just incredible. Dark Night of the Scarecrow, uh, I think one of the greatest horror movies ever made. I don't know, I don't think I've done a show for that one, but to me, it's one of the best like '70s horror kind of exploitation movies that was basically made for television, and it's one of the scariest and one of the creepiest movies ever made. I got to check to see if I've done a video for that. I lose track, but if I haven't, that needs to that needs to be done. I think that's an incredible example because it's essentially a TV movie, so they couldn't show uh, lots of things because of censors. But it's such a creepy movie, and it's such a great story, and it's centered on that, and but yet a lot of things are implied. You don't necessarily see it. It's a big TV horror films. It's basically a case of like less is more. A lot of the times what you don't see is more terrifying. But I think Dark Knight of the Scarecrow is a prime time example of that. I think another movie that I think is another example of that is Steven Spielberg's uh, Steven Spielberg's first movie, Duel, uh, which was a TV movie, and I think that movie is like just so terrifying and so incredibly suspenseful. And again, it had all these limitations because of ratings, but it's got so much imagination to it, and there's so much tension, and there's so much emphasis on having the story so strong, because they can't rely on your typical horror tropes. But just an amazing example of like a TV movie. Um, and then another movie that I feel is a perfect example of it is, which is my all-time favorite exploitation movie, Tourist Trap. I did a show on that a while back with Chuck Connors. That's my all-time favorite horror exploitation movie. That is the epitome of that. That movie. A lot of the reason that it didn't get an R rating is because they they didn't really have the budget to do a lot of things that they wanted to do, but it it was a series of the circumstances that that movie was put in because it didn't earn an R rating by the board, and it was looked at initially as like maybe it's not a horror movie per se, but it got ended up that film ended up getting picked up. It didn't get distributed uh, to the public through a theatrical release, but it got picked up for syndication, and essentially became known as this kind of cult phenomenon of a movie, and it's essentially a TV movie. And to me, that's the same exact thing. There's not a lot of things are implied. It's such an incredibly bizarre movie, but and I think it's really due to the limitations within that movie. It doesn't have copious amounts of gore, copious amounts of sex or violence, but it so it the emphasis is like really creating that atmosphere, and it's such it's such an effective movie. It's one of the most bizarre movies ever, and I that was a movie I watched all the time on cable. That's how I got exposed to it on television. Just wild. And this to me is another example of that. Like this was literally made for television. And the Zuni fetish doll is like I literally think it's one of the most terrifying horror movies ever made. It's a short, like it's like only 15 or 20 minutes, but it's so gut wrenching, and especially the ending is like horrific. And to think that this came out in 1975, I definitely think that this movie, and it's centered on this doll, this murderous like doll that becomes alive. She ends up acquiring this doll as like a collect for like a from a collector's standpoint, but this doll is alive and is like possessed by this demon, and the thing is like this Zuni fetish doll is just utterly terrifying, and it's basically her trapped in this apartment with this doll, and this doll is trying to kill her. And it's kind of a funny movie too. It's very humorous too, but it's so terrifying. And to think that this was made in '75, and then also to think that this was a TV movie is insane. Like to me, that's just such a great example of incredible filmmaking and incredible direction, and having the mindset of being so creative with all of these limitations. It's amazing. Um, and I definitely think like this came out in '75, so this predated say a movie like Child's Play with Chucky by many 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 years. So this obviously was an influence on that because it's centered on this murderous doll, just like Chucky. But I honestly think that this is like I love the Child's Play movies, but particularly the first one. But I think that there's something about this movie that's even more terrifying and more sadistic. One of the most incredible things about this movie too is the ending. It's so utterly terrifying. Because she, without giving the movie away, she at one point essentially becomes possessed by the spirit that is in the doll, and it's so terrifying. The last couple of minutes of the short is just like blood curdling, just amazing, just amazing. Dan Curtis, who directed this film, he was an American director, writer, and producer of all things television and film. Um, he worked, on many many television shows and television movies and series, and also a few theatrical movies. Um, he was writer, director, producer of television and film, known among fans as horror films for his afternoon TV series Dark Shadows, which is wild. Dark Shadows is one of the most popular, kind of, one of the first series ever. It came out before the Munsters and the Addams Family. Classic show, but that came out in '66, and Dan Curtis directed that. Other films that he did, or TV films, was the Night Stalker, which is really great, and that's about. I thought that movie was about Richard Ramirez. I could be mistaken, but that came out in '72. The Night Stalker. He also did a version of Bram Stoker's Dracula in '74. Just wild. And then he's probably most well known for this, the Trilogy of Terror, which came out in '75. Um, just amazing. Uh, super prolific, super prolific career. And William F. Nolan, who was also involved with these three short films, he was a writer, and he's like responsible for writing like literally hundreds of stories in the science fiction, fantasy, and horror realm. Uh, he was an integral part to this whole series. Um, yeah, super cool, super cool. Um, and Karen Black, who is the star of this series, who is just one of the greatest, not just in horror, but I think one of the greatest actresses ever. Uh, she was an American actress, screenwriter, singer, and songwriter. She rose to prominence for her work in various studio and independent films in the 70s, frequently portraying eccentric and offbeat characters, and established herself as a figure of New Hollywood. Her career spanned over 50 years, and she has over 200 credits in both independent and mainstream films. Black received numerous accolades throughout her career, including 2 Golden Globe Awards, as well as an Academy Award nomination and Best Supporting Actress. Just wild. Uh, she died 2013. I didn't realize that. Yeah, amazing. This was the first collection or first films that I saw of her. Uh, as a kid. She was in a Robert Altman movie called Nashville in 1975. The great Robert Altman. Um, and she received, and she also wrote the music for the soundtrack, and she received a nomination for a Grammy Award for that work. Um, she also portrayed, uh, she was an actress in John Schlesinger's The Day of the Locust, which also came out in '75, and she was nominated for a Golden Globe for that film. Um, she was in Offerings, which is an awesome movie. Um, she was also in an Alfred Hitchcock movie called The Family Plot. Uh, just amazing. Uh, she was in a play directed by the great Robert Altman, a Broadway play, Come Back to Me, Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean and Jimmy Dean. Um, that was her theater, one of her theater shows. She was in a comedy also based off of a Robert Altman story, Can She Bake a Cherry Pie, 1983. Uh, and she was also in Toby Hooper's remake of Invaders from Mars in 1986. Uh, she also starred in a variety of art house and independent horror films. Uh, she was also in, like I mentioned, the top of the show. In the top of the show was Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses in 2003. Yeah, just an amazing career. Uh, so such a rich and diverse career she had. Um, but again, I always go back to to this collection. I think it's the best thing she's ever done. It's my personal favorite. Um, and to see like all three of these short films back to back and realizing that this it's the same actress playing these roles, and just how so unrecognizable she is. It's amazing. Like just so inspiring. And like again, like I said, the last show with the Zuni fetish doll being the most uh, one of the most terrifying movies ever made. Uh, and considering it's only 15 minutes, just so awesome. 1975. It's crazy. It's crazy. So this is Jason Dean. Thanks again for your support. Please check out this amazing movie if you get a chance. I need to get it on Blu-ray. I need to get that together. But thanks again for your support, and we will see you next time. Peace.